welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. This week I'm reviewing the anime episode Top Runner, and we kick off this review, as we always do with these reviews, by talking about the positives and the headline positives. All the big things I'm discussing over the course of this video, and then some. I felt the humour was well executed, the action was decently delivered, and I feel that it combines two episodes decently well. You may be getting a little bit of a case of deja vu from what I just said, because these are pretty much the exact same major points I praised the previous episode over, so yeah, if nothing else, we could certainly say that this series is nothing if not consistent. Now, I think that this is the first time in the series, I'm sure that someone will correct me in the comment section down below, that this is the first time that we end up seeing that it's possible for multiple people to have the same quirk. We've seen people with similar ones to one another, but I think this is the first time that we explicitly see multiple people having the exact same quirk. This week we get the idea debuted to us by the weird trio of ne'er-do-wells. I don't even think I can really describe what they're doing in this episode this early into the video, but hey ho, if you're watching this review, you've definitely seen the episode itself, so you'd know what they're up to. The kind of thing I think that, well, Mineta would try to get up to if he was really able to. In any case, we end up seeing them having this weird comedy moment, which I will admit that both in the original version and this one, it ain't for me, it ain't my kind of humour, but hey, it doesn't overstay its welcome. To go back to something a little more substantive, I think that aside from maybe Tenya and his brother, I don't think that, well, even then, you can't really say that their quirks are one-to-one, because I think that this week it kind of implies that his brother's quirk is slightly different, but you get the idea. This is the first time that we properly see a bunch of people having the same quirk. Maybe Crawler's is the same quirk as well, maybe not. We'll soon see as all this develops forward. As I say, I don't think the opening gag with the trio isn't really for me, but I will just say that I am glad that it didn't overstay its welcome. This is one of those points where, as I was reading through the manga, I was worried exactly how long they'd lean into this and how far they'd go into this. But at the end of the day, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It has a decent impact for what it was, even though at the end of the day, it's not the kind of humour that I'm personally into. Of course, when it comes to pacing and such like, when you're reading something, the pacing is a lot more personal. When I was reading it, the gag seemed to go on a little bit longer than I wanted, but hey-ho, I think it is still effective for what it is, even if it's not for me. Though it is, kind of odd that here we are in this moment in the story underlining the fact or reminding us that multiple different people could have the same quirk, that it's done in a way like this, that we have this moment that expands the world, expands the nature of quirk, just this great world building moment, and it's done with characters like this, which, great, you know what, fair enough, and it is done in a way which again does not overstay its welcome. It tells us everything it needs to, and it is one of those points where you don't really realise how important it is until later on. I mean, you can make the argument that this is an episode that by including this joke and including these two episodes together, that the introduction of this trio early in the episode is in some way foreshadowing what we end up getting later on with Inginium, and then the fun little flashback moment that we get with Tenya trying to use his quirk and not really succeeding with it, I think that that's a neat thing, and I like the way that it was ultimately put together, but still, you know what, I'm not gonna forensically analyse a quick little joke at the start of the episode. Like I said previously, I think the humour in this week's episode is good, I think it is solid. It is a lot less goofy and a lot more character-driven this week, which is fine. This series, as I mentioned in the previous review, does both of these things well. And in some regards, it does the goofier humour a lot better than the main series does, but hey, different strokes for different folks. Though I do have to say that I wish the humour this week was a little bit more creative. Like, we don't get anything to quite the same extent as with the previous episode, where you get the little shot where you got the little cartoon versions of Crawler and Knuckle Duster with the squeaky voices. We don't get anything quite like that, which is a shame, but hey-ho, it does what it can with what the material is here, and the material here is, for the most part, fairly grounded, fairly serious. It doesn't get too wacky or silly this week, which is fine, no criticisms here. This week, the two major plot threads, as is exemplified by the two episodes that are combined here, we have one that's focused primarily on Bee and developing her and the schemes that she's wrapped up with, and then we transition into the great introduction and demonstration of who Inginium is, their powers, and their hero agency. Yes, these are two separate episodes that once again have been combined into one, and I do think this episode handles this scheme a lot better than the second episode in this series did. to be blunt, the pacing is still off, as the content of those episodes is still kind of self-contained. I mean, it isn't. It isn't self-contained because of the fact that these are characters in a wider recurring narrative, or rather, they are recurring characters in a wider narrative. But you get the idea. These are not episodes that have stuff that really leans into one another. There wasn't really much of an overhang from the episode that we had that was mostly focused around B, and then into the episode that was mostly focused around Inginium. And I do think that both those episodes do work well, and I do think that together they work better than what we got in the second episode. But I still think that there needed to be a little bit more of a something to connect the both of them better. There wasn't really much of an attempt to weave these two stories together. They feel very detached from one another. And whilst you can treat this as just almost like, as been mentioned by a commenter, I think it was Jack O'Lantern in the previous week or two, that, you know, you treat this as like getting 2 for 1 in a single episode. It's 2 episodes for the price of 1. I get that, I understand that, but still, I think that there just needed to be a scene. It might have been a filler thing or whatever to create a greater sense of an interweaving between these 2 episodes, or alternatively maybe alter the format a little bit. But hey, we're starting to pivot into how I would have done it territory, which is the path of where madness lies as far as I'm concerned. Sure, maybe a flashback scene of B talking to the bad guy would have helped, or something else, but still, I think the first half of the episode with B is still good. I think that gives us this better insight into her as a character, as an individual, her personality. We get a lot of really weird and interesting moments, but I say weird in like an interesting way, not in like a put-off kind of way. That you have this character that is so focused with something to do with some degree of villainy, some degree of some grander conspiracy, some bigger organisation from what we're teased in this episode, and yet she still acts like someone in her late teens, early 20s, very much like most of this current era, this current generation. She's just kind of mooching about. She takes pictures of her food, she takes pictures of her snack food, and just kind of listens to music and such, which add this weird kind of creepy uncannyness to the character, that she just looks like a typical teenager, and yet she's involved with this bigger, grimmer thing. And I like the way that this is put together in this episode. To be fair, it does give a hint that she's involved with a wider organisation, a villain network, a gang. At this point, we don't really know the full extent of that. It's still very early into the story, but in this episode, we do learn that she's working for or with a group, and that she's collecting data from the villain incidents that she's creating, or being connected to, or just travelling out to whenever those things are coming. I will just say is that in the manga, it isn't clear who she's talking to for obvious reasons. It's a written piece. There isn't really a major hint with just the typeface alone that who she's talking to. It's just text. Maybe in the original Japanese version, the characters that they use for the lettering there might give a particular hint if it's stylized a certain way, but when you're reading this for the first time, you don't get much of a hint with it. This week, with the voice acting, I will be blunt, I'm surprised that they didn't try to disguise the voice. Like, I will admit that from where I'm sat with the manga, I've not read all the way through it, so nothing has been confirmed or revealed at this point for where I am sat in the manga. And to be fair, I might be wrong, as I have been wrong with these kind of things in the past, and whilst, you know, that person on the other end of the phone being who they are makes sense, I do think it's odd that they tease that this early into the story. Like, a voice change or something else would have at least added some more mystery here as to who she's really talking to. I don't know how it will be handled in the dub. I watch it subtitled because I, generally speaking, prefer the original Japanese voice acting with the My Hero Academia stuff. Though I admit that I have listened to a little bit of the dub version. I think the voice acting there might be a little strong, but hey ho, different strokes for different folks. But hey, I will be blunt, I might be wrong, because I have something of a tin ear when it comes to Japanese voice acting. It just might be someone that sounds very similar to that person, but still, we'll see where all that goes as it comes forward, though I have this odd feeling that I might be right. Getting a reveal of one way or another that she's involved with some kind of big, grander scheme is something I will admit I have mixed feelings of. Like I said, it makes sense, and even ignoring the voice acting clue, it makes sense that, you know, she's part of a grand operation here because of what she's up to, and the fact that she just says, oh yeah, I'm collecting data, or you have to collect more data for us. Like, makes sense, and it does help to build up this broad idea that there was just a more criminality in this era than maybe we're led to believe. in the main series, it gives us this strange impression that outside your purse snatcher or your general ne'er-do-well or the odd gang here and there wasn't that much villainy much at all until the League of Villains started to make their moves in the main series. I mean, sure, we don't know exactly at this point in the story what scale all this is, whether or not it's on All for One League of Villain levels or just something more regional. But, it is good to see something. I mean, just by what we hinted in this episode, there's some greater level of scheme here, there's some greater level of mechanics here, there's some greater operation at play, and it is refreshing to actually see that it wasn't just a case of that the moment that All for One got knocked in the head, All Might have pretty much solved all criminality in Japan, and there were still these organisations out there doing stuff. Whether or not they're connected to All for One doesn't really matter, but what matters is it does create the sense that this world still has, criminality to deal with to one degree or another, which I do like. It helps to build out the world, and it wasn't just an endless age of peace, prosperity, duckies and puppies, as kind of the manga, or at least the main series early on, kind of hints is. But hey, you can also put that down to the fact that the series itself wasn't fully developed, but hey ho, we move on. On the other hand, there's still a part of me that kind of, whilst I do respect the fact that he's building out the world and gives us this sense that there were other gangs and other groups up and doing stuff, there's a part of me that still kind of like the idea that B was just someone who was still just kind of doing it for kicks. And I find that to be a more creepy prospect than her being part of this grander criminal empire. Which, to be fair, she still kind of does. I think that in this episode she is getting bollocked by the other person on the other end of the phone line because they just throw out a bunch of these creepy, nasty bees to cause problems, and well, they did cause problems, and I think I'd have to go back and either reread the manga or watch that episode, but I think that she's getting bollocked by whoever is on the other end of the phone, so she still has that chaotic nature to it, but I don't know. To be fair, I think I've just kind of convinced myself and realised, yeah, she's still acting in a chaotic, weird way, a creepy way, but hey, it is what it is. I think it's just a pacing thing, because bearing in mind the manga, how many episodes are in the manga up until this point for us is the anime, it feels as though we got a greater sense of her being some kind of independent entity before this moment, but maybe on hindsight, maybe not, but hey, we're getting a little bit distracted here, but hey, I suppose it's a case of be careful what you wish for. It's a dark half that I think that's, well, darker than the second half of the episode, but hey, I think it could have been darker, but, be careful what you wish for. The second half of the episode is more action orientated, and it's that is where we get the introduction of Inginium for the first time in this series. Not Inginium as we know them from the main series, that being Tenya, but his big brother, when he was still, well, able to be a hero, but hey ho, you know what happens there. And I do like the way he comes across in this episode, as well as with the manga, but we're talking about the anime in this era now. I think he comes across very well. I do like how they presented the character and how they are performed, and it is going to be very hard for the Stain stans out there to justify him getting walloped in the main series after this. Here we have Ingenium being just a nice guy, being the nicest guy, just being perfect big brother man, so how is it going to be for the Stain stands to justify him getting knocked in the head like he did in the main series? Because up until this moment, a lot of people go, no, man, I'm sure that Stain was totally justifying what he was doing. When you think about it, that guy was probably, taking money and, doing, merchandising deals and stuff. He wasn't, a real hero, not like Stain was. Which, this week, it kind of underlines the fact that, no, Inginium really was just a nice guy that was in the wrong place at the wrong time, facing down a monster, but we'll see. We'll see how the character of Inginium is developed over the next few weeks and months, or however long this series ends up going for. I do like the fact that he is presenting here as not just being an older version of his brother. In fiction, particularly pop fiction, there's this nasty recurring problem that I find that siblings are often shown as being too similar to one another. The personalities and the quirks, in terms of their personality and what have you, they tend to be a little bit too similar to one another, which they can be, and I say that as an older sibling myself, but oftentimes they are shown in stories as just being nominally different to one another. They're just shown as being slightly different, but just still functionally the same character. Whilst there is elements that you could see of Tenya with his brother in this episode, I certainly think that Inginium is shown here as being a very supportive, focused individual, one that is very much at ease with himself and his work. He's not laid back, but he knows his speed. No pun intended there. And I do like the introduction action sequence we get with him. I will admit, and I know that this is something of a bugbear of mine, the CG was a bit hit and miss. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was genuinely great and was really brilliantly well integrated into the animation, but sometimes less so. Like, just the cinematography of that whole opening bit with him and the bat guy thing was just brilliantly well put together. I liked how the background was done as we got those focused headshots on the bat guy. Which I know is an odd thing to praise, me praising the backdrop stuff, me praising the stuff in the backgrounds, but we all know how fast-paced action sequences in animation can look. It's a lot of lines and blurred backgrounds. This week we don't get that because we actually can see the background. It's done with CG, and its introduction into this is done right. We had something similar in the second episode. It might have been the first episode. No, the second episode when Pop Step was chasing down the salaryman, and you got the background stuff with her. I think that stuff is done well. It's just that there were certain moments during the suit-up sequence with Inginium which weren't that well integrated, but then it was that weird thing of one shot looks fantastic and it's a case of was that hand drawn or was that done with CG, and then you get the next shot and it's very obviously done with computers. But hey ho, I still think it was well put together. I would love to gush on the action sequence itself, but it's one of those cases of it just works. It's just great. It's just fantastic for what it is. And because of just how fast-paced it is, it's kind of hard to discuss it at great length. Just from a pure pacing point of view, it gets the point across perfectly. This is a high-speed action sequence, and it's able to maintain that speed throughout without it feeling overpowering. You get a sense of speed without it feeling as though the fight itself just passed by in the blink of an eye. And this is all topped off with almost the punchline of the action sequence, with Crawler being the one to help bring down the villain. And there was a part of me that when Crawler just slid out from the alleyway where I just thought, okay, so in the original, did Crawler do that? Was it intentional? Or was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Because the look on Crawler's face when he slides into position is the most dopey I've seen in it. And I've read forward and just seen how dopey he can look in this series. But hey, I suppose that's the point of it. It's supposed to be unclear as to whether it was intentional or not, but still, you then get to bat a guy getting punched in the face. No, just as a side thing before we move on, there was just something that just kind of made me laugh when they were going on about, oh my god, this guy, he appears to have some kind of bat wings, and it was just me thinking, this villain, he appears to be some kind of cross between a bat and a man. He's some kind of bat-shaped man! Dun dun dun! He's some kind of man-bat, if you will. Oh, well, he's still not as bad as the, do you think it might be terrorism thing that you get later on in the series, but still, it made me giggle a bit. Anyway, moving on into negatives. I don't have a major negative, so we won't lean too long into this. But as I mentioned previously, I think there needed to be a stronger connection between these two episodes. A couple filler scenes here and there could have helped with that. Maybe taking the same scenes, taking the same material and just rearranging it in such a way that it created something that felt like it worked better for television. I think that would have been appreciated. Yes, you get into that pathway of debating how faithful or not the anime versions of manga should really be, but for me, there needed to be maybe a couple scenes here and there to create that better connection, even if that was just a case of just either was a blink and you missed it cameo shot from B somewhere in the background as Man-Bat guy was getting chased down. I don't know, but I think there just needed to be that stronger connection there. With that said, let's get into the overview and just say that I really did enjoy this week's episode. Or episodes, depending on how you want to divide all this. I think they were both adapted very well, and I think that in their own halves they're very well put together, and I think that as a whole entity they do hang together decently well. I just think there needed to be a better connection between the two of them. I will have to say, though, that I am curious, if not more curious, to see how the next episode will go, because a couple of days ago I was just double checking to make sure that I knew what this week's episode is going to be called, so I could do the thumbnail art ahead of time. I did a little bit of maths and I realised what the next week's episode is going to contain within it, what episodes it's going to adapt, and It's a bold play, I'll certainly say that, and I'm interested to see how it will all hang together, because it's one of those things I did discuss in the manga reviews as to how they would do one particular plot element. Because it's one of those things that when it happens in the manga, it's one of those, oh wow, really? Moments, because of the nature in which it's put together. I don't know how that's going to hang well together when we see it in an animated form, but we'll see. This is one of those moments where I really want to. I just want to talk about the thing. I just want to talk about the thing, but I can't because it'd be spoilers. But we'll see where it ends up going. But you know, we'll deal with that. But anyway, with all that said and done, however, let's get into Comment Corner. It's time for Comment Corner. Apologies if I rush through this a little bit. I am conscious of the time and we have been running rather late today and I really want to eat my salad. With that said, let us get to Big X1 who says, I think this is a better episode than the last one because it feels like one full story rather than two different ones. This is of course referring to the previous episode whose name escapes me at the moment. I'm happy that you enjoyed and I do wish that this week's episode felt more like one full story than two different ones. But I do have to say that it does feel like more of one entity than the second episode did, because the second episode really did feel like two separate episodes, like the Cartoon Network thing that I think was Jack O'Lantern, whomever mentioned the previous week. Going the wrong way, looking at the wrong things. Now, so we have, speak of the devil, Jack O'Lantern, who says, great review as always. P.S. Did you hear about the bonus My Hero Academia Vigilantes chapter that got released early this month? I heard it's labelled as 15.5, which I assume means it's an interquel chapter. Do you think that the anime will take that into account, or simply it's too late to do anything about that? I don't know is the honest answer about it. I think that it depends on just how much has been adapted up until this moment, because I get the feeling this is a series that has been in production for quite some time at this moment. If there is still time to do it, it will be integrated into it. I've not read that far ahead of it, so I don't know if this is a case of just either A, elaborating on stuff that the writers never had time to elaborate on in the first case. This is altering stuff so it makes the adaptation in the anime easier. Or maybe they are testing the waters to see as to whether maybe they could do a follow-up to Vigilantes at some point in the not-too-distant future. Even if it is not literally Vigilantes 2, they could easily just do a series of, oh, here's another set of Vigilantes somewhere else in Japan in a different time period. Maybe even further back around the time that Quirks were still arriving, or maybe something a little more recently where all the stuff is kicking off with the prison break or what have you, or just about anywhere else, really, or here's a missing chapter kind of a deal. You know, we'll see about that. I get the feeling that they're wanting to find the next My Hero Academia chapter. Like, it's going to be probably a while before we get a follow-up manga at any case, and I don't know if there's enough material within the team-up mission, school brief stuff to do a series with, but we'll see where all that goes. And last but by no means least, we have Scott TV Gamer who says, I could be wrong, but I doubt the characters not having eyes in the scene is an error and is a stylistic choice similar to when you're done for long distances. It's done so people won't stand out. I just watched the scene to see what they're referring to. The Wolverine guy had his eyes drawn, so it's a relevant character, so it's just that they were just people. Thank you for your comment. And I understand that these were just background characters as such, the focus, they didn't really need to go crazy with drawing them out. And we do see that this week. But the difference between last week and this week, or rather that particular scene and the similar kind of stuff we see with this week, this week, those characters without the eyes, it was obvious that they were just background characters and we weren't supposed to focus on them. Last week, those people without the eyes were full force right centre frame, so it's hard not to see them. So even if they were background characters, you could have kind of expected them at the very least to just maybe be drawn and have their eyes closed. Like, they didn't know, they just needed to do, you know, when they draw people with their eyes closed, they draw the line, so could have just done that. That would have been perfectly fine, or draw like X's or arrows or what on the line, because they're really, really excited, whatever. But anyway, we won't debate too much about last week's episode. Let me know what you thought about this week's episode. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!